What's going on? It's Ant, CEO and founder of Let Bob. We got an exciting episode coming, man. I was watching the movie Till and I seen Mountain Bayou, Mississippi. Never heard of it before, but it's black owned business at its best, man. I ain't gonna reveal all the information, all the history, but for Juneteenth, man, I wanted to do something different, a different episode, kind of live in what black owned business is really about and show like what's the power of it when it's executed at its best. So y'all look forward to it. When y'all see what we doing, I promise you gonna learn something. Again, it's Ant. I'm out.
It's just something that I live. It's just something that I live. Hey, hey, hey. It's just something that I live that this world don't live. It's just something that I feel that this world don't feel. I gotta keep it real. J.E. Get 'em. It's just something that I live that this world don't live. It's just something that I feel.
Welcome to the Let Bob podcast. Got an exciting show for you guys today. We got a special guest. Y'all know I'm an old soul, so anytime I get to talk to my wisdom, I get excited. But what's important and what's special about this gentleman, he's in a place that many people who look like us don't even know about. I discovered this location watching the movie Till recently, and I told my team we have to reach out. Let's see, can we find somebody, some people from the area to tell us about the town and tell us about, insight that we would not otherwise know about. And this gentleman who we have on the podcast today has some great insight. In fact, he happens to own the Mountain Bayou Museum of African American Culture and History, Mr. Hermon Johnson. How you doing today, Mr. Johnson?
Oh, I'm doing fine. It's good to be here.
Oh, well, I'm so excited to have you on here. So I'm from McCall, Alabama, over here in a small country rural area. And
Okay.
I grew up in more of a village city. Everybody knew everybody. And so I'm gonna call you Mr. Johnson for the whole interview. Please, I can't do anything else. I can't call you by the first name. My granddad will come out the grave and choke me down. So I can't do
Well, you have my permission, but if Granddad's gonna get you, then okay.
Okay. Thank
You can call
thank
me
you
Herman,
so
you can call me Mickey, but we don't want to upset Granddad.
I'm gonna call you Mr. Johnson. Keep him
All
happy.
right.
I
All
want him to come
right.
out the grave and get me. But now, I had never heard of Mountain Bayou, Mississippi. Never heard of it. I watched the movie Till here recently, and as you know, being from there was just a tragic story. But a nice, I guess you could say, depiction of what it is to be Black in America and what it was to be Black in America, and knowing that the Black population and ownership was just so extreme in Mound. I was really adamant about getting someone from the town on here to just give us an insight and tell us about it. So, were you born and raised there, or did you move there?
I was born and raised here.
Oh man, so you've seen some things.
I've seen some things. Right. Yep.
So, seeing that you own the museum, was your family always owners in Mound, or how did that come about? How did you get into?
Yes, my great grandparents were part of the original settlers. I have
Oh,
four great grandparents that came up from from Vicksburg area, which the original settlers came off a plantation south of Vicksburg called
okay.
Hurricane and Bryfield, and so I had four, ancestors that were part of that crew that came up from Vicksburg. Yeah, and so my grandfather owned a cotton gin,
Oh,
and it's little known fact that, let me just say this. Can I just go off for a second? Black people really are not just really finding out our history.
okay.
And Mount Bayou was known to have the highest grade of cotton in the world.
Oh, wow.
And that's where that's our people who from that plantation. Well, let me go back a little bit more, because most people, since you just discovered Mount Bayou, then probably your audience, most of them had never heard about the remarkable history of Mount Bayou. Let me say a couple of things, and you can just tell me if you want me to go deeper or not. But I'm going to just say a couple of things. First of all, it goes back to the plantation that they were on, but down in Vicksburg area.
Okay.
They were educated on that plantation. They were educated. Matter of fact, the founder of Mount Bayou, his father, Ben Montgomery, was probably one of the most educated men in the state of Mississippi. While he was enslaved. And then after the Civil War, he bought the plantation that he used to be enslaved on. And then after he bought that plantation, then they developed the highest grade of cotton in the world.
Wow.
And so from there, when they came to Mount Bayou, when they came up here, then this area, well, he dies, and then his son takes over his vision. And his son comes up here, and they plotted out an area that was halfway between Memphis and Vicksburg, 100 miles each way. And this was just wilderness, and they were building a railroad through here. And so they bought land from the railroad and established Mount Bayou in the wilderness, and then developed again the highest grade of cotton in the world. So this city had more, because we had the highest grade of cotton in the world. Instead of just having one cotton gin like a town of this size probably would have had, well, they had to end up with 6, because everybody in the other areas around here would bring their cotton here because they got a higher price if they brought it here and got the Mount Bayou label.
Wow.
And so therefore they ended up having to have 6 cotton gins. And because it was uniquely Black and created Black, then of course people who were being mistreated in other areas around North Mississippi would come here to spend their money when they got a chance. So therefore, the people who own businesses here got wealthy. And so that's why in Mount Bayou, you had all of these 2 and 3 story houses with white picket fences around it, that even the president of the country was invited here, and he came and stopped, Theodore Roosevelt, and called it the Jewel of the Delta, because he had never seen anything like that.
Wow, that's amazing. And more importantly, it's never, I'm really learning this as you're talking about it. And I'm like, wow, there was Black owned cotton. There was Black owned cotton gins and Black owned businesses creating and selling cotton, growing and selling cotton. Like exactly. This is stuff you just generally don't hear, So I got another question for you. I think you were telling me about someone buying the plantation that they were on. They come back and buy it or something. You were telling me.
Yeah, the Davis plantation. And let me interject a couple of things in that. That plantation was owned by Joseph Davis. His younger brother, who was on his same land, but not that particular plantation. It was Hurricane and Briarfield. The other plantation was owned by Jefferson Davis.
Okay.
And Jefferson Davis happened to be the president of the Confederacy.
Okay.
But his elder brother, 23 years his elder, owned the plantation that people from Mount Bayou were on. I mean, eventually Mount Bayou had been on. And yes, they ended up, because Benjamin Montgomery, who was one of the most educated people, not only on that plantation, but in the state of Mississippi,
okay,
and had been basically running the plantation. At the end of the war, the Davises sold the plantation to the Montgomerys for $300,000.
Wow.
And when I look it up, I don't know if you can Google it yourself, but I think the last time I looked it up, I think it said that that's the equivalent of $10 to $12 million in today's money.
Wow. So wait a minute. I got to make sure I'm hearing you right. You're saying that a freed slave was able to come back and buy the plantation For $300,000?
For $300,000.
Wow.
For $300,000, and then become, I mean, he outworked all the other neighbors around him, and then become one of the top 5 planters in the country, in the United States.
And what year was this again?
In the early or in the mid 1860s.
Oh, wow. Oh, okay. That's what I'm talking about. Man, that's Black ownership at its best.
That's Black ownership is the best. So Mound Bayou started off that way in ownership, even back to the plantation.
Wow. Nah, man, that's unheard of. I've never heard any history like that.
Now, can I add one more story that you might be interested in?
Sure.
On that plantation, they were allowed to also run businesses. So they owned a store on the plantation. So when the steamships came up and down the Mississippi River, which was right next to the plantation, and they wanted to resupply, and they had a post office in there too. They wanted to resupply and mail letters. They stopped in the Black-owned plantation, the Black-owned store on that plantation while they were enslaved. And so, of course, one of the captains of the steamship protested, and they said, and to the owner of the plantation, and told him, "Why you got these Black people?" He said, "Look, I buy my stuff from them." And so he was buying from them too.
No, I love that, because it shows that Black ownership is definitely important, but alliances is also still necessary, right? Just because everything is, or we want more Black ownership, that doesn't mean we don't want any other culture to own anything. It's just how do we operate collectively, right? How do we kind of get more of a level playing field in the lane of ownership and get an experience like that? Bob stands for Black-owned business, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our pillars are education, community, finance, and ownership. And so for us, this is what it's about. But hearing an example of what it looks like when you have Black ownership, you have Black people spending their dollar in the Black community and make that dollar circulate. To your point, everybody can benefit as a culture.
The example of Mound Bayou would probably be a good example of that, because the money circulated around here more than anywhere else probably in the state. Wow. Because the fact that you in the most racist, hostile state in the Union was Mississippi. Yes. And so it's very inhospitable. And if you go outside of Mississippi, it's dangerous. And so, go outside of Mound Bayou was dangerous. So people will come here. It was a sanctuary city. So if you were in trouble in other parts of the state, you end up here. But you want to stay here. And so money circulated here. So all those principles of business, a lot of those, what we call capitalistic principles of business and that type of thing. If you study Mound Bayou, you will see a lot of those things that were involved here. Now, of course, there was racism from the outside, but a lot of things were.
I think the movie Till showed some of that, right? That's definitely what got my interest. The only other Black community that, I was versed in is Black Wall Street, Tulsa, and then somewhat in the Carolinas. But Tulsa was the one that I was very familiar with, and that story and what happened and how we were doing there. And so to see another city, I'm going to come there too, because I'm neighboring. I actually wanted to come there to his interview, but time didn't allot for it. But I definitely want to come and put my eyes on it, right? Walk through the city. I've never seen something like that in my lifetime in reality, right?
But there are other cities. That's one in your state, Hobson City, Alabama.
Really?
Yeah.
Never heard of that.
There's an organization called Historical Black Towns and Settlements Alliance.
Okay.
And if you go to that website, it's hbtsa.org, I think. And you go to that website and you can see the other cities that are part of that organization that are drawing together the other Black cities in the country. So there's a bunch of them in Oklahoma, Kansas, I believe. Some of them have died out, and some of them are not really still there. That's why Mount Bayou is unique, because it stayed in the state that it's in, or in an autonomous state for all these years. We were incorporated in 1887,
Okay.
and so it's still here. There is a kind of a drought here now, but that's a drought that's really had taken hold of all the Delta towns, or all the agricultural type of towns.
Yes.
So and we're doing a lot now to revitalize this area and revitalize Mount Bayou. And I think because of the civil rights history in this area, and also the Emmett Till history, and also the blues is from this area. We're right here in the middle of where the blues was created. Okay. We have value that we can utilize to revitalize this whole area and bring tourists from around the world here. And so that's what we are working on now.
So what type of businesses are there now?
The biggest business here now is the Delta Health Center.
Okay, health.
Delta Health Center is a rural health center. It was the first rural health center in the country.
Okay.
And it was founded here in the late 60s. It was a big deal. That's a whole historical thing by itself, because of the fight that they had to go through. And the fight was national. There was some laws that were changed in Washington because of the fact that we had this rural health center here. But now there are, I think there's 2,500 rural health centers around the country now, but this was the first one. So it's the biggest employer now. Most people that live here work outside of town, maybe in Cleveland or in other places. So,
okay. And is that health center, that's Black owned, or is it a public facility?
It's a public facility, but it was started Black. And okay. And the everybody that the people who run it are Black, but and they have satellite offices. It's probably the largest medical organization in the Delta. Okay. Because they have other satellite offices around the Mississippi Delta.
Okay. And what's the population there now? Like, how many people are in Mount Bayou?
We probably have about 1,500 now.
And it's mostly Black still?
It's Black. We have 4 white people here.
Oh,
I can tell you their names.
That's what I'm talking about. Okay.
There are 4 white people. I can know exactly where they are at all times. I keep an eye on them. No. It's Black. It's Black.
That's cool. You hear that? And it's not violence. You're not on the news for killing and shooting and all that good stuff.
Well, let me tell you a good story about that. At the beginning of Mount Bayou, in the early days, in the early 1900s, we had a jail. They built a jail because every town's supposed to have a jail, right? Uh-huh. And for 20 years straight, they didn't put anybody in it. There was no crime. And they decided at the end of 20 years, they say, we're not putting anybody in jail. Let's tear the jail down because we need that land. And they tore the jail down.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a pretty much you don't hear about it. No, our skin color is not what makes crime. It's racism that ends up causing crime. But anyway, a lot of it.
Conditions. Our opinion at Bob, financial literacy is definitely a driver of crime. It's a lot. It's definitely not a skin tone, right, or a race.
Exactly. And let me tell you one other remarkable fact about this area here, about Mount Bayou. And I grew up here, but because they were educated, the people, and I didn't even get into that story, but they were educated on that plantation. And so once they were free after the war, they were already educated. They came here. And so before there were school districts that the state mandated, there were schools here in Mount Bayou. And so that tradition of education carried on all the way from the plantation, even up until now. The place that I'm in right now is the old band building for the high school, which is closed now. They consolidated our high school, which is a huge mistake, but they consolidated and sent our high school students to another city, right? But this school district, when it was still a school district, I think 8 years ago was when they consolidated. Up until that time, Mount Bayou was in the top 100 high schools, one of the top 100 high schools in the country.
Wow.
Because of the education that was here. There have been studies, theses, people have written theses and studies on why that there was such an elevated number of children that go on to higher education from this school district, even though this was the only district in the state of Mississippi that did not have 16th section land funding like everybody else. So we had less funding, and we had a higher rate of a higher rate of higher education than any other school in the state.
No, I don't find that hard to believe. It actually supports a lot of what I say. When the teacher looks like you, they're biased towards you, and you're more comfortable in the messaging coming your way. I think that a lot of what we see now is everything is generic. And so whoever is creating the generic material is writing or designing that in the bias delivery of what race or culture they're from.
Yeah.
That's just natural, right? It's not to say that it's any ill intent there. It's just how it works, right? And so hearing your numbers is actually kind of cool for me, because it's like, well, that's what I say. We don't have a realistic example of that where I'm from, here in Birmingham or McCalla. It's not we don't have the let me back up. I haven't had the experience where it was Black educators only educating from a Black curriculum and driving that knowledge through a child's mind all the way up to high school. I've never witnessed that.
And it wasn't just in here in Mount Bayou, being in a small town. When I was growing up, it was probably about 5,000 people when I was growing up here. But, it was more like a village. Everybody taught you. You could not go to the service station where all these old men would be sitting there smoking cigars and telling lies to each other. You couldn't even go there without them quizzing you about your asking you academic questions.
Yeah. Because
this area was that way. Everybody participated in educating you.
No, that to your point, village mentality, it's found in family, right? And I think that's a structure for true growth and true innovation. It must be found in family. And so in a village mentality like that, you take a collection of families and create one big family, and everybody cares, right? Nobody gets left behind by the nature of the structure of how lifestyle is, right? Now you have difference of opinion in how things are, and kind of how the family structure is in our community. And I think that's why we see a lot of challenges we see from academic struggles, from violence, from just what we think family looks like.
And I tend to believe that village structure, without going into a deep education of it, I believe that was sort of like what we did in Africa.
Oh yeah,
village raising the children mentality, and that's what we did here in Mount Bayou.
Yeah, no, one of my executives is Ethiopian, and she definitely tells us stories about how it works over there, and even how her family do things here in the States. It's that village approach to it. And in talking to her and learning more about it, I realized that's how I grew up. Everybody knew everybody. You didn't. Nobody in the community didn't know who stayed in 2 houses down, or if I was outside being bad, you better believe my grandma, my auntie, or my mom, my dad got a phone call, and things were addressed. So
that's it. That's
that village mentality too. So one last question for you. So I had this question. Were you or any of your family in the movie, in the Till movie? Did they allow anybody from the community to participate in the movie?
No, I don't. The Till movie, I don't know where they shot that movie.
I would have thought they would have definitely come there and shot some portions of the movie, so they didn't shoot any
I
of it
don't
there.
know. I'm having a brain freeze right now. I know they shot the Women of the Movement. You know, are you familiar with that? It was a Jay-Z Will Smith production. That movie was shot in Greenwood. That was shot here in
Okay.
Mississippi. The
Okay.
Till movie, I don't remember, but I was just the producer of that movie, um, the guy who spent 29 years putting that movie together.
Okay.
Um, is we I was just with him Friday,
Oh.
but he is going to come back here to do another movie and
Oh,
to
cool.
do it on TRM Howard. And
Cool.
TRM Howard, to us, TRM Howard, because I called him in when I'm in the museum and I'm giving tours, I always called him the godfather of the civil rights movement because he touched so many people. He mentored Fannie Lou Hamer, which is in Rouville down the street. He mentored Medgar Evers, who worked for him. He went over to Montgomery, and during the Emmett Till situation, he spoke at MLK's church, and he was the one that influenced Rosa Parks to sit down on the bus after she heard him at that speech. He
Wow.
also mentored Jesse Jackson. He actually started Jesse Jackson's Operation Push and Rainbow Coalition in his house when he went to Chicago. And so Amzie Moore, who boycotted the gas stations here. So yeah, this guy had a big influence. So the guy that wrote the Till movie wants to do a movie on TRM Howard.
Wow.
And that's his next project.
That Mr. Howard is what kind of caught my attention because what he was doing in the movie. And so that's how I started down the path of finding you guys. You know, I saw it when they shot it there, or when they said in the movie where they were, I saw that. But what caught my interest is what he was doing. And so I went to start researching, like, hey, did this guy really do this stuff? And so that's how I was.
Oh yeah. My father's first job out of college was working for TRM Howard.
Okay.
That's
cool.
That's really the reason that I'm in I was born here because of TRM Howard.
That's cool stuff.
So yeah, and yeah, he did that. He did all of that plus more that they don't talk about. That's why Beauchamp believed that he needs to do a more exhaustive movie on TRM Howard because people don't know about him.
Correct.
And his influence. You know, TR Howard, let me just tell you a couple of notes. I don't know if you researched this or not, but he fell out with the people at Taborian Hospital. So he went across the street and built Friendship Clinic. Well, next to Friendship Clinic, he built an inn called Green Parrot Inn. He had a parrot at the door. That's why he called it the Green Parrot Inn. And next to that, he built the first Olympic-sized swimming pool for Black people in the state of Mississippi.
Wow.
And then next to it, he built a zoo, which may be the first zoo in the state. I don't know. Don't quote me on that, but he built a zoo here in Mound Bayou. And so there's a lot of things that happened here in Mound Bayou that was normal to me growing up, but abnormal to everybody else. And I'm looking back at it and I say, yeah, you know, that was kind of crazy.
He built a zoo.
But you know, I could walk across the street to the zoo. So you know.
That's good stuff. This type of history is so important. Because of just where the culture is right now, like really hearing stories that creates a level of hope that shows ownership is possible and what it can look like when it's happening for our people. I think hearing historical statistics to support the statement of how important ownership is. Like you said, he didn't agree with what this hospital was doing, so he had ownership in his back pocket so he could go build his own, you know. Exactly. And so this is how I think we can really address social change and really close this financial wealth gap by pushing ownership on the culture. But unfortunately, as much as I'm loving talking to you, my team, they cut me short on my podcast today. We're doing a Juneteenth special, And so we're having to kind of keep our podcast short so we can kind of merge and have a nice expression on Juneteenth to promote history like yourself and Mount Bow. Just show people things that you just wouldn't normally know or see if you didn't go looking. I can't make a promise though. I'm going to come there. I'm going to come visit there, and really want to see the town and come to the museum, of course, and meet you in person. And just
absolutely, we love it. We love it.
Yeah. Well, my team will make sure we let you know when we're coming, and make sure we pick times that accommodates your schedule so we can spend some time with you. But I really would like to say thank you for coming on and sharing history about your city and your town and what you're doing on today. Are they able to find you? Do you have any social media like Instagram or Facebook or anything like that?
Go to moundbayumuseum.com.
Okay, perfect.
And I couldn't tell you. I know we have Facebook page, but I'm not the social media type of person. We have people working on that, and I'm not the guy. So I do know moundbayumuseum.com.
You like me? That's how I am. My team make me do social media, so I have to know it. Right. They make me do it, so I have to know it. But I limit it. But it's been another great episode of Let Bob Podcast. We thank Mr. Hermon Johnson for coming on and telling us about the great city of Mount Bow. As you always know, you can find us on all social media at We Are Let Bob. You can find myself at I Am Let Bob. And we're out. It's just something that I feel that this world don't feel. I gotta keep it real.